So, so this is the beginning of the afternoon. So, before before the first try, small announcement. If some people want to visit a lab test, the last visit will be to the next break. So there is some. It's still doable to do it. So feel free to go to see the lab test as the next break. Celia, can I ask people to come on stage, maybe? Genova and Kate?
I can do it, don't worry.
So do it.
I'll do it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a very friendly fireside to talk about lots of cool stuff. So we'd like to have on stage Genova Chen and Kate Edwards. Please, s'il vous plaît. All right, yeah, grab one of these drinks and have a seat. So I'm going to try to be able to see the three of you. Okay, so I'm going to grab my water. So we're going to talk about lots of different stuff. And then towards the end, I'm going to take some questions from the room. All right. Do you like the fries? Yeah, it's pretty good. So a big thanks to Blondine, who it's thanks to her that we had the fries today. So a big round of applause for Blondine. Yay. Where is she? Okay. So for those of you who don't know these awesome people, you should already, but I'm going to do a quick introduction of everyone. So Kate, you're Executive Director at the Global Game Jam. You're CEO of Geography. So you do consultancy to talk about culturalization. We saw your awesome talk yesterday that was really packed with super useful information. I had to think about it later on, like, wow. So I can't wait to have the slides. Are you going to post the slides online at some point?
Yeah, I'll post them eventually.
That'd be cool. Okay. You're also the board member of Take This. Do you want to quickly describe what Take This does?
Yeah, Take This deals with mental health in the game industry. So they're well known for, like at the PAX events, doing what they call an AFK room, which is kind of a mental health peace room where they can go in there and relax and get help if they need it. So, and basically advocating for reducing or eliminating the stigma around talking about mental health.
So that's very important. And you are the former executive of IJDI, so thanks for your work with this awesome association. And you're a geographer and a geek. We saw that. Genova. So you're a very well-known designer for your flow chart that people find in my book. You're the flow chart guy. So you're designer of the award-winning games Cloud, Flow, Flower, Journey, and most recently Sky, Children of the Light. So how's it going? How's the launch going?
Well, it's just starting. We only had the game on the iOS so far. And worldwide, we maybe have 5 million players. But we're working on our Android build and also the console version. I'm pretty sure most of the people here only play console games and don't want to touch a mobile game.
We love mobile games. What are you talking about? We love mobile games. So how many of you have played Sky?
All right. Yeah.
We need
great.
more people.
I'm here to do the sales.
Yeah. So download Sky on iOS, coming soon on Android. Do you have a date for Android? Not yet.
Sometime this month, and we don't really have a date
There
yet.
you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. So it's a game about giving. Can you just explain a little bit what you're trying to accomplish with this game?
This is part of my talk afterwards, so I don't want to spoil that.
Okay, so just in two words.
Yeah.
No? Okay, well, later on. So that's the teaser for if you want to know what the game is about, you have to stay. And you're the founder of that game company.
I'm a co-founder. When we started the company, it was two.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who's the?
My co-founder was my graduate student, classmate, Kelly Santiago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sweet. So, and you're creative director there. All right. So my first question to you is, what is your greatest challenge that you had the past year? So either at work or a personal that's tied to work. Kate, do you want to try to start? She's like,
You're talking about anything at all?
And what your greatest challenge? Something that you really that took a lot of your brain power.
Well, I think for me, I mean, it's kind of an obvious one for me was having back surgery about 9.5 months ago. And the way it relates to work is that obviously your back is kind of important to your mobility. And I travel a lot, like 80% of the year. And so I was facing the possibility of not traveling much, not being able to go speak, not being able to go to client visits and have studio visits and all these other cool things that I get to do. And that was really demoralizing. But you've got to take care of yourself. We forget that how important it is just the physicality of us, of us being able to move around and be healthy. And I think so many of us are so driven with what we want to do that we oftentimes forget the importance of just being physically healthy. And that was a big challenge because I don't like to be immobile. I don't like to be stationary. And so having to have the surgery, which I did 5 days before Christmas, and then which the timing was intentional, so I could spend a couple of weeks just kind of relaxing and healing. But then my first business trip was a 3-week trip that started a month after surgery. That was a mistake. It was a mistake. That was to talk at Pocket Gamer, and then I had to go speak at other events as well. And I just, I thought, I'll power through this, I can do this. And I knew I could, and I did, but it was a mistake. And so, it was a good, healthy reminder for myself, not just the surgery itself, but just to kind of be more mindful of,
Is your back problem like a spinal disc kind of lock offset?
Well, what I had was had a herniated disc that was causing sciatic pain in my left leg that was like really severe.
So both me and my dad and our lead engineers and our designers, a lot of people have back troubles. And initially I thought that was just me, but many people I work with are suffering with back problem. I don't know how many of you guys here have back issues, and I'm wondering if this is like a video game industry specific problem, or is this just computer and desk?
Well, I guess though what's interesting with that is just it's a reminder, a painful reminder that accessibility is so important because we might be fine now, but tomorrow, who knows? And we're all aging. This is the way it goes. So all of this is really important for any of us. How many of you had, you don't have to answer if you're not comfortable, but how many of you had surgery in your life? That's a lot. So just a reminder of that we're healthy today, hopefully, but who knows?
Part of it too was the reality that I'm 54 years old, and so problems like this are likely to become more common. So it's kind of like the reality of facing your age, even though I don't feel that age at all.
It's a lovely age.
So. But, it's just the reality. As you get older, you tend to have issues. And even though I exercise every day, even despite exercising every day, there's the possibility you're going to have problems. So,
thanks for sharing that. Kate, how's your back today?
it's pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's getting a lot better. It's still in the healing process, but it's getting a lot better.
Okay, that's good to hear. What about you, Genova?
Compared to a surgery, I think I'm just gonna be melodramatic, And my biggest struggle is my own ego.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you wanna? Can we have a couch so you can maybe lie down and we can talk about it if you want.
When we shipped the game, we had a party. I invited a bunch of people, and Sky is a very, very long project, 7 years. I've never heard of anybody who survived making games for the same game for 7 years, right? So we have a lot of developers who joined us with full of passion youth, and then after 5 years, they burnt out, they left, right? And still, when the game shipped, they come back, because to them, this is so much of their life, and I feel like I owe everybody that I need to ship this game, otherwise they would be wasted 5 years for nothing. And so for a very long time, while I was working on the game, I worked really, really hard. And at some point in the middle of the development, some of my leads that worked with me for over 10 years was questioning whether this is the right direction for the game. So a lot of the leads basically had a fight with me on who's right, what is the right direction for the company. And we had to deal with a lot of people leaving after we can now settle on a direction. And after that, my wife told me, you basically change into a different person after that day. Because you're just obsessed, you just work so hard, and I don't even understand what are you working hard for. And I told her I have to prove that I was the right person. I have to prove, because now that all the people who worked with me for a very long time is essentially kicked out of the company, then I got to be the right person. I got to be the one who actually make the right choice. Otherwise, who am I, right? And so for a very long time, I'm just obsessed about proving that I'm still the right person. I made the right choice. And that was miserable. That does a lot of damage to my personal health and to my company and to my wife. And it was only until the game shipped and when we start to see how the game is helping the players, that I realized that, it's not really about whether you're right or not, because that is pure ego. And when you're pursuing the ego, you hurt people around you. And, it's really important about, has the thing you worked on really helped other people? And when I realized that no matter what choice we made, in the end, if the game helped people, you're okay. And it's worthwhile. And from that point on, I was able to drop my garage against all the people who was fighting against, my choices. And it was a pretty big revelation for me.
That's a very interesting insight, and it's pretty harsh to think of it that way, because when there's a lot of the games that either don't see the light of day, like a lot of us have worked on games that never shipped, or games that really did not work well. Do you think it's really the end product that's important, or the journey? Because at the end of the day, every day we're working like maybe for years on a game that we don't know what's going to happen. Is there a way that we can just be happy into what we're making without
So yesterday I was talking to William, who sits right there, and he was asking me stories about the development for Journey, and it's kind of interesting that I believe, which is, from my own experience working on games, is that whatever game you're making, when the player experiences it, the condition and the well-being of the team who works on it would reflect in the game, no matter what you're working on. So we often say we're just working on a video game. It's not art. I didn't put myself in it, but your well-being affects the game. And so you can imagine how tough Journey is.
So that leads me, that's interesting, because I wanted to maybe touch upon that question. That leads me to the question of crunch. We have so much of a crunch culture. So what do you think, how is it impacting, so I'm going to also ask you, what do you think for people well-being, but what do you think the impact on crunch is on the product we're delivering, on the games we're delivering? You're saying that it's an impact on the game, so that's my question to you.
Yeah, the thing is, TGC is actually not a very big company. When we work on Journey, it was 12 people. Flower was 9 people. And even with Sky, majority of the time was 15. we don't really have much to crunch because most of the time we're just searching for an answer. You can't really like speed up and work overnight to find inspiration. So to compare to AAA company, we are like 75% R&D and final 25% is shipping. And so the crunch ratio of our company is probably the lowest in the industry. But we have so much stress because of uncertainty. I don't know if you've heard of this story that someone was, my friend who was the guy who started Arab Spring, he said he was kind of put into the prison and they put something to block his vision and they just left him there in the prison for several days. That was worse than torture according to him, because he doesn't know if he's going to be killed the next moment or if he's going to survive. And that the uncertainty is the most worst torture. Then you just basically physically harm you and kill you, right? Because you know it's coming.
We're making games, though. I mean,
but yeah, uncertainty is definitely what adds a lot of stress to our developers. Yeah.
So what do you think about that, Kate and I, the impact on people's well-being, but also maybe the impact on the game itself, that crunch culture?
Well, I think crunch culture, there's a lot of stuff I could say about this. I mean, this is one of those key issues that I was railing against when I ran the IGDA. And I've still been very vocal about it, as I've been very vocal about my support of unionization efforts and labor efforts in the game industry. And a lot of times when I've talked to developers around the world about this issue, especially like, what do you think about forming a union? I mean, almost always it's because of crunch. That's the reason that's compelling them to form a union and have some leverage to push back. And so I know that in the studies that we did when I ran the IGDA, we had this thing called the Developer Satisfaction Survey, and we did it like every 5 years. And so we were able to show that crunch has slowly decreased, just a little bit. And not only has the frequency of it, but when it does happen, the periods of crunch have also decreased a little bit, but the practice is still pretty prevalent. And it is a regional practice more than anything. You see it a lot in North America because of the work culture there, which is basically work yourself to death. Especially in the US, where basically if you don't seem busy, then you must be lazy, or there's something wrong with you if you're not busy. Which it's a horrible thing. But in East Asia as well, where there's infamous crunch culture that exists in a lot of companies there. And, but then you look at somewhere like Europe, where a lot of the labor laws in the countries are pretty strong. And they're pretty strict about whether or not you can work overtime. And it's not only that, though. It's not just the labor laws. It's also the fact that I think a lot of cultures here just don't accept the idea that I am going to give that much of my life to these companies. There was a great example when at IO Interactive in Copenhagen, when I was there several years ago, when I was asking about the crunch culture there, and they said, we don't crunch. And it's like, it's not that we don't need to, because we do get behind sometimes, but they said the people won't. They drift in at 8 or 9 in the morning and they leave at 5 or 6, and nothing on earth will change that, because that's just what the Danish people do. And so the CEO said that I need to adjust to that. And like, that's the right answer. You need to adjust to the people's schedule, not the other way around. And the reality, one of the things I've been trying to do is educate people in these crunch culture kind of companies, that you point to good examples like that in Europe and say, look, they still make great games over here and they don't crunch.
Can I add my own observation? Because I work with NetEase, which is a Chinese company. They work 996, which is 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, right? And I was like, why are you guys working so hard? Like, it makes me feel bad because I only work, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I feel bad, so I asked them, like, what do you do in the extra hours? They were like, well, the boss is still here. It's rude to leave, so we just browse the internet and, chat and have fun.
I was at Huawei headquarters in Shenzhen
Yeah.
for 2 weeks in their office, and I can completely confirm that.
Yeah.
They were there for 12 hours a day, but they were absolutely not working their asses off for 12 hours a day.
Right. So they were actually having fun, like getting food. Anyway, so what I was gonna say is I noticed this thing that is, I mean, it's just from my own perspective, is how much people crunch has a lot to do with how much money they will actually be rewarded after the crunch. So crunch culture 10 years ago is way more serious because I was at Sony, I get to witness that. But at the time, a cup of coffee was like $1.68. A game is costing $60 to buy. And now, even at Sony, people are like, oh, I don't want to crunch, because like the manager's telling me like, oh, it's the millennials. They don't work hard. They don't, do things. But I was like, right now, a cup of coffee is like $5. And a video game is still $60, which means you're making 3 times less money than before. Why should you crunch? You're not even going to be rewarded. The Danish people, I assume they have pretty good social welfare, that they don't need your money.
Yeah.
Why would they crunch? Right?
Used to the Danish people, you good people, you don't need money. Woo!
I mean, if you really, really need money and you want a lot of money and the game could make you a lot of money, you do work hard. I see that happen in Silicon Valley. I see that happen in China. Those are the young people who really wanted to be rich fast, and they crunch.
Yeah, I think there's a certain truth to that. I mean, I think the other thing that's important to point out is every creative industry has that balance between what I think crunch is. To me, crunch is top-down imposed. It's when management tells you that you will be working like 16 hours a day, whereas we all experience creative groove, which comes from within, which is when we just decide, like, you're on this roll, you're in a good kind of groove where you're
In the flow. That's
yeah,
what
you're
we
in a
call it.
flow, yeah, whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it. But you're in that space where creativity is really working well for you, and you don't want to stop. I mean, there was a great example, Noah Falstein, who used to work at LucasArts, and he worked on a lot of the famous LucasArts games. I remember him telling a story about how, I think it was on Curse of Monkey Island, where one time just a group of them were talking towards the end of the day, and they were like trying to solve some kind of problem. They said, well, let's go to dinner together and let's just talk about it. So they did, and while they were at dinner, they kind of solved the problem. Like, they had that light bulb come on, they're like, that's it, that's the solution. So they went back to the office and worked all night long to do it. And they said that one day changed the course of the game in a really positive way. And but that was one day. They didn't do it for the next 3 months. They did it for one day. And I think that kind of punctuated moment is a good thing. But take this, we did a white paper a few years ago called Crunch Hurts. And I encourage you to look it up because we have a lot of really great statistics in there. And it shows from just a medical standpoint that the human body cannot sustain more than 2 weeks of crunch. And after that, the ROI goes completely gone. So it's...
Yeah,
Yes.
actually, we also had the same experience. When we were younger, most of the founders of TGC were in their early 20s. So we were like, we don't sleep anyway, right? And so we worked pretty hard, but as we enter 30, now I'm getting close to 40, I just can't do it. Like I could not crunch. The interesting thing we also noticed, just like you said, we have so much energy that even just working on Journey and Flower was not enough. Like my team was like, let's do a game jam, 24-hour, 48-hour game jam. Like we take the weekend, let's make a game.
sleep.
And no sleep. It was terrible. And like during the game jam, I'm usually not the designer. So I'm the one who would take slack. I was like, I can't stay up anymore. I need to go home, right? But as we grow older, we just can't do it. And like once we do a game jam like this, I need rest. Yeah.
Well, I think even when you're young, you can't really do it. I mean, the brain needs rest, but when you're young, you don't necessarily see the impact of it. We have the feeling that we're blind to our own blindness, so you have the feeling you can do it, but you don't pay attention to all the mistakes you're doing and all the moments you're not creative. And so as we're older, maybe we're wiser with that. You know, like, yeah, no, why would I do that? It's actually not efficient. So you were saying earlier, yeah, like video games, like a lot of them still cost like $60, but a lot of them are free. So what do you think is the impact of free-to-play on our culture for the well-being of the game developers? But also, what's the new challenges that it bring for you and for the developers, and the new maybe ethical concerns around it?
Yeah, this is coming back to the first question, when I'm actually struggling outside my own ego. How many of you guys work on free-to-play games here? All right, there's actually quite a lot. So my struggle is, my entire career goal is I want to make games to be a respectable industry and respectable career. It's very self-serving though, right? You know, when I retire, I want to be respected. And the thing about that is we want our audience to, trust us and to respect what we do. So when I was working in console industry, you can pretty much ship a game with a made-up trailer and people will pay you $60 up front because they trust you deliver a quality experience. But on the free-to-play industry, not only they don't want to pay you a dime, you have to pay them. You have to pay all the ads and the user acquisitions just to have them to give you a little bit time. And I felt like my struggle is like people don't trust the games we made, and that was very, very new to me, especially in the free-to-play. I mean, just the kind of thing people say to your games is, it's very hard to swallow initially. Yeah.
So what do you think, Kate? What's the impact of free-to-play or on our well-being as developers, but also for the public and for ethical concerns?
Well, I mean, my view on free-to-play, I mean, I understand all the business reasons why it's done. I mean, I get that. But I honestly think it cheapens our art for what it is. I mean, have you seen free-to-play movies? Where you just walk into a movie theater and just sit down and watch? You don't have to pay to go see a Marvel film or something. That doesn't happen. You know, they want compensation for the work that they put into their art. I think we should have that as well. I think maybe in some cases it makes sense to maybe do like a little teaser kind of thing. But when you've got like a fully operational game that's playable without ever paying, what does that say about how we view our own work? That's what worries me. And especially if we are not valuing the work that we're putting out there to the public. And then if we're on top of that crunching or having other work practices to create a work that's not even going to be compensated from the public buying into it, that kind of, to me, doubles down on sort of a feeling of shame. It's like, why are we doing this? I mean, why? Because we're scared of people on Twitter who yell at us? I mean, why are we serving up this free food, and never getting compensated for it in some way? And yeah, I understand how the business works, but just kind of at its core, it really rubs me the wrong way. Because you really don't see many other creative media doing this approach.
Well, we have more and more platforms where you pay for a subscription,
right,
and you watch whatever you want.
Right.
And we are moving towards that. We've got Apple Arcade and Stadia, like Google Stadia. So we are moving towards that. Like, people are going to pay a subscription, and then you can consume whatever you want. But then the developers are going to get paid depending on how much time people spend on these platforms. So.
Which is not friendly to indie games.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially for games like Journey could not survive on that.
Yeah, so the thing is, when we were working on console, we respect our player, we respect their time, and I realized as we grow older, we all have less time to play games. So if I could create a strong emotional experience with 1 hour, I wouldn't do it 2 hours, right? And that's how I view making game being respectful. But when it comes to free-to-play, it's all about engagement. I mean, when it comes to even subscriptions, it's about, hey, you know, are the people keep coming back to watch your thing, then you get compensated more.
So, okay,
Yeah.
let's put a pin on this for a minute. Yes, on the other hand, with games becoming free to play, you care more about engagement. So in some ways, you can also be more respectful of your players, because it's not like, hey, you're buying on trust and you don't know what you're gonna get. Now we can let you play for free, and if you're engaged, then you can pay if you so choose. So we can also see it in a different way. And it's actually helping to think about engagement and motivation and what people care about. But what it does also is now we're gonna have to add some mechanics to ensure that people come back and eventually give us money. So we have a lot of people talking, like raising concerns around what they call addiction, which is a very delicate term to talk about, because addiction is a pathology. So if you're not necessarily addicted to games if you play a long time, but it does raise the concern of the attention economy. Like we see a lot of people now, like Tristan Harris, like in Silicon Valley, raising these concerns. So should we be concerned about that, and should we talk about it to try to not fall into this trap? Because you can be engaging by offering a great experience that you want to come back. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but there's a fine line between this and maybe trapping people into coming back, just because we need that to survive.
Well, I mean, part of what bothers me with what I've seen in some discussions, like especially in the mobile space, I mean, honestly, there's a couple conferences that I've been to recently where the person on stage, when they're talking about retention methods and different mechanisms they build into the game to get people to come back, and honestly, sometimes it sounds exactly like tobacco companies. It's
Vegas.
It's the exact same kind of conversation around nicotine and getting hits and getting people to come back because they're preying on a certain human behavior. And that really bothers me when I hear that kind of discussion. Now, I understand what they're doing. I mean, they're leveraging human mechanics, you know, in order to get them to play. But it's like that starts to cross an ethical line for me. It's like just because you can exploit a certain human frailty doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, and again, it's a very fine line, because as like nicotine, like a substance addictions, it's a very different thing that an addiction without substance. But it does raise the concern, like because we are only gonna get paid if we get attention from our players, how are we gonna grab this attention and keep these players on the platform? Just like you have autoplay, maybe you came over to just watch one video on YouTube or one video on Netflix, but now there's autoplay. So, oh yeah, I guess because we're removing that barrier, I'm gonna stay on that platform. Maybe you should have done, or you would have done something different. So yeah, these are really complicated questions to talk about, and raise a lot of challenges also to survive in this industry, and to think about what's our place and what should we talk about.
Yeah, let's, because the free-to-play, I can just rant a whole day and it will not end. But this is a discussion about inclusion. And so I kind of want to focus on that a little bit. One big thing that happened to my career is around 2015. You know, I've been building premium content this whole time. But then there comes the explosion of mobile platform. My entire career, I was hoping that I could make more people to be aware of games' artistic quality, or the positive influence games can create on them. And suddenly, you know, back then, 15 years ago, people were like, if I tell them I make games, they'll be like, oh, you guys just corrupted my kids. He's not studying hard, you know, just bad influence. And that was what I was trying to fight for. I was trying to show that games can be good, games can, you know, it can be not addictive but still powerful. And then as I thought that game industry is moving towards a more artistic medium, now we even see AAA games have this very powerful emotional moment. Even Kratos is now having a kid, right? And I was really feeling like, oh, finally the game industry has grown up. And then suddenly you get 2 billion smartphones flushed in the market, right? You have 200 million consoles, and then suddenly 9 out of 10 people who plays the games around have never played a console game. And all they knew about games are these kind of a match 3 or some kind of a loot box game, And nowadays, if I ask people, I tell them, hey, I make games. Well, they don't tell you how you corrupt my kids. They don't say that anymore. They say, oh yeah, my kids play Minecraft. But they say, how much money do you make? It's like they assume that they've heard so much how much game it makes money. They just assume we are like here for the money.
We all billionaires are here. Yeah.
Yeah. And to some extent, I felt like, my dream is if I tell people I make games, they just treat me as if I tell them I'm a poet. I write novels or something. I'm a journalist. I cover news, right? I am a theatrical director. I direct, plays. There's a certain level of respect, and that was something I was looking for. And to get that respect from everybody, we have to include them. We have to change their impression on what game is. And that has been, my dream, and which is also why I'm thinking about, oh, maybe I should just jump into mobile, because I could change more people's impression on games. But this place is very toxic. We used to say that whatever free-to-play mechanics that survived from Asia, that's like a jungle. Whatever is the most poison thing will survive. And you take that over and put it in the Western market, it's going to work. It is a jungle. Our game is now running in China. The players are very rude. Towards me and towards our company and towards our publisher. They just assume that every single design we changed was to extract money from them.
So is it players overall or just a small minority that makes it toxic?
The minorities are always the loud ones.
There you go. So before we go talking about antisocial behavior, Kate, do you think that our industry is really becoming more inclusive, or how do you feel about that?
Well, having been in this industry for 26 years now, yes, it's better to a certain degree. We're definitely seeing different faces. We're seeing more of different faces. We're still a very long way from the reality that where we'll see that those who make games reflect those who play them. I think we're still quite many years away from that. We're getting better though, but the problem is that we do certainly have systemic sexism in countries, or companies, and countries. And we're seeing that. Just look at the riot scandal that broke last year. That was a huge deal. And that's just the one that got found out. We all hear about anecdotal issues throughout different companies. And it's not just about gender too, it's about underrepresented groups not being included in the creation process as much as they should. Unless the game happens to have like a character who's indigenous or physically disabled or something, and then they bring in an expert to consult, which is great because they used to not do that. They used to just pull a stereotype off the shelf and plug it in instead. So they're getting better on the creation side and representation. I've seen huge leaps on that side, which are really positive, and I think that's going to continue as a trend. And in some of the projects I'm working on right now, they are really going out of their way to strive for inclusion in representation in the game. So I think that side of it, it's not solved, but it's a lot better. And I think there's a good trend line to be more positive. It's more on the workforce side, where we still have a tremendous amount of work to do. Globally, on average in different countries, it's still about only 15 to 20% is women working in the games. and that's pretty low. When you consider that those who play games are basically, it's gender parity for the most part. You see a lot of underrepresentation of ethnic groups and other groups. And so we need to do a lot better on that front. And I know there's a lot of companies striving really hard to do better, but I think we still are in an age where there's a certain level of tokenism going on, where they like, okay, we hired 3 of that color and 2 of that gender, and I think we're good now. That kind of thing.
One thing about gender, I'm going to talk a little bit in my talk as well. I just came visiting from Us2 Games. They just launched their Assembly, which is a great game on Apple Arcade. I really loved it, and I went to check out the team, and I think they have more than 50% women in the studio. When I was working on Sims, so work at Maxis, when they were doing Sims, I think 4 out of 5 designers are women. So in the end, it's kind of like, ultimately, what do you make attract what type of developers? And games, at its nature, do appeal more to different gender based on the genres. Sims was majority female players, so the developer tend to be more female, right? And I have this friend who worked on female-only games called Nyx Hydra. It's a mobile company. It was over 70% female. But yeah, if you're talking about like a fighting game, I'm pretty sure Mortal Kombat will have an extremely high male ratio. But overall, I think in the game industry, if you look through all the genres of the games, that the game that would appeal to female market is a lot less populated compared to the,
How do we know that, though?
Well, you will see in my slides, yeah.
Well, we have to be careful
Yeah.
with the self-fulfilling prophecy when we think, oh, this is a genre.
No, like
that's
my
gonna-
point is we need to make more games to appeal to both gender, and particularly if you want to see more female working in the game industry, you got to make more games appeal to female. Yeah.
But that being said, I think there's also a lack of recognition of women who play games that are viewed as typically male games. And I worked on 3 of the Halo titles. The Halo Studio 343 is run by Bonnie Ross, and Kiki Wolfkill works there as well. And there's a lot of women in that studio. I've worked on Call of Duty. And it's like, I love first-person shooters. It's my favorite genre. And I know a ton of women who love first-person shooters, and they're not just going to well, I'm going to go play The Sims tonight. It's just that I think part of when we, unfortunately on the industry side, when we come up with these terms like mid-core and hardcore and all this kind of bullshit terms, which nobody has real evidence for what that really means, I think a lot of times we're kind of glossing over the fact who's actually playing the games. And so I do feel we need a lot more data on that to really, and I think not just the data, but I think the people who are making the decisions need to recognize the fact that it's actually probably a more diverse field of people playing than they
Yep.
believe.
Yeah, and there's probably a lot of women who love to play MOBAs and love to play first-person shooters, but maybe not in these games where they're just women with big boobs. Maybe this is what they don't like. So yeah, there's still a lot of...
I have some data for you guys.
You do?
So for example, in China, right?
Very quickly, because I
Okay.
want to ask one more question.
Yeah, so mobile game is popular, Dota you mentioned, right? The most popular mobile game in China is called Clash of Kings or something like that. And it has like 35 to 40% female players. If you go actually check out that team, they do have actually a much bigger female presence in the development team. It's like a self-fulfilling thing, right? Like the more female is, the more female wants to work on the game. And then we have this new game in China. I think it's actually the first time a romantic game designed for young women ever existed. And that company they were basically majority of female, and they're interested in making games that serve for women. And the game is kind of like a simulator of Twilight. You get attracted by, well, you are appealed to 4 special men who are like, vampire or special powered person, and they are all going after you, right? So you get to like date between all 4 people. And it was so popular that they went up to be #1 gross game. They beat Tencent and NetEase. because there's such a big market for young women, and that company was majority women. I'm just saying, like, we need to innovate the games so we have more content that attracts more women, and we would also be able to make more women want to make those games.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that we need more inclusion,
Yeah.
more diversity, and not just women, but transgenders and other genders and LGBTQ plus community. So we need all these people. I don't think we want to go into like now we have games for boys and games for girls. I don't think this is the idea, but yes, we need more diversity in the workforce.
What would be the right words to use? Because I sometimes would use masculinity and femininity, because as a man, I'm not very muscular. I kind of like the feminine kind of game. So the game I make tend to attract feminine quality men or, feminine quality women.
But that's the reason why
Right.
we should just go beyond this notion of what do men and women want and just make games for everybody and whoever wants to make whatever contest. Okay, well, it's already, oh God, that's going too fast. We're in the flow, you can't just lose the, okay, I don't want to end with toxicity. It's gonna be a bit grim. Maybe I'm gonna take one or two questions in the audience so that we can make it a bit more. Yes, over here. Stéphane. Don't destroy the phone.
It's half a question and half a comment. Most of the discussion you had seems to be to the position of people making games. If some of the people making games say, I'm an artist, I am a creator, I'm not an industrial, there is, even with the crunch, the painter can spend 6 months all day and night painting a painting, and nobody will talk about crunch because it's a creation of something. And at the end, he will put his painting and he say, it's $15,000 for my painting. You buy it or you don't buy it, but I will not change the painting according to the analytics on my painting. This is my painting and you have to take it, either if you are a man or a woman or any kind of people.
To be fair, painting is not interactive, so you don't need to do something to get access.
I don't think it's very different. The position of being an artist, Joseph Beuys say, if you want an art, you need people who say, I am artist. It's the first point for a game to become an art.
Yeah, so you don't, okay, so there's no question. You said you had a question and a comment, but okay. There's more of a comment. Sweet. Yeah, and I guess it's the same aspects. Like we need diversity also in whatever we offer. We have, like in other industries, we have more art, pieces of art that is actually harder to understand, and that it is the way it is, and we have to make an effort, and those are more easy to consume, and I think there's room for everything here again. Is there another question? Yeah, there's a question over here, and then we can wrap it up. What time is it? Yeah.
So from what I understood from the first part of your conversation, you were saying that free-to-play games kind of fail at giving a respectable representation of gaming and video games. But with, for example, League of Legends and Fortnite, it's making this industry very grossing. Like, we're making a lot of money, and it's taking kind of the sport image. So what do you think about esports and the way it's growing as a field now?
I think the fact esports now has surpassed sports is a great thing for the industry. And I always root for the industry to grow to be a bigger market. One thing that I find quite inspiring was when I was talking to some colleague in the industry, and they are trying to solve a problem, which is they want to give those people who participate in the esports a real career, because the people who play esports right now, in the majority genres, they cannot make a living. They're playing for the passion, but they can't live. And I think the fact the esports market is growing, and which allows more people to be able to become a real athlete for playing video games, that would be something that I would love to see. Yeah.
Do you have something to add on esports?
No, I just think I like it. I mean, I think it's a great trend. I mean, it's showing, it's showing the public more of who we are and what we do as game creators. I know some people in the industry who kind of cringe at it. It's like, I don't want my game being used at a tournament or something. It's like, well, you should be flattered. You created a great game and people like it and they like to play it, to the point of actually learning how to get good at it. So I think it's a good thing. I mean, I don't really ever really seen any downside. I mean, the main thing I'm concerned with is just kind of a little bit to your point about the treatment of people who are esports, athletes, so to speak, and how they get treated and all those kind of things, and the toxicity around the environment, which is a whole nother option or another topic.
Yeah, we didn't have the time to really address this one. Yeah, we're running over, so just to wrap it up in a very short, like a few words, what is your hope for the game industry, let's say in 5 years? Genova and Jen Kate.
My hope is, hey honey, what kind of mood are you in? Let's play a game. It's not like, hey, are you a gamer or not? Do you play games? It's like, what kind of mood are you in? Let's play a game. That's the future I want to see. That's when people don't look at a game as some kind of subculture. You say that to literature, you say that to music, you say that to movies. So I want to see more diversity of video game content. So no matter what kind of emotion you want, political games is actually what I consider as a very similar emotion that you will get from watching some of the award-winning documentaries. Just learning things, right? And this genre is still very, very small. And as I was mentioning earlier, like there's not many games that my wife is into, right? And I wish that in that future that wouldn't be a problem.
Thank you. What do you think?
And from my point of view, I still think we have a lot of work to do to reclaim the public narrative about what we do. It's something I speak a lot about because it really bugs me when I'm out there talking to the public, talking to government officials and other people like that, and they still have a pretty negative perception of what we do. And a lot of it, I think, is because they just simply don't understand what we do. And I've heard some great anecdotes where studios, like even small indie studios, they will say like, well, this local politician hates games. And so what they did, like in one case in Canada, they invited this MP, this member of parliament, to visit their studio, and they sat him down and they had him like try ZBrush and Unity, and they showed him how they go through the game creation process. He met all the people at this studio, there's about 20 people, and he found out these are nice people, they've got families, they pay their taxes, and so in one day, just because they opened the door and they decided to take the high road and be the ones to actually show, and say, look, this is what we do and this is why we love what we do. In one day, they turned this guy around 180 degrees. So he became a huge supporter of games and as a industry and as a technology. And I think we need to do a lot more of that. I think it's on us to be the ones who do the outreach and to show the public what we do, because compared to like film, most people know how films get made, and there's tons of movies about movie making. But for games, a lot of people have no idea how games get made. They don't understand our thought process. Some people have told me they think that we sit around thinking about how violent to make the game, which, like when I worked on Dead Rising, we did think about that. But but that's because it's Dead Rising. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just, I think we need to do a lot more, and I think it's on us to take that step and do it.
So Kate, if you get to choose different medium, like a television series, a movie, a documentary, right, and a game about game making, which one do you recommend us to make that will really evangelize developers?
Well, I think one thing, like a film like Indie, the indie game movie, I think did a lot to open people's eyes, but I think we need to make a game, like Game Dev Story, or something like that. I think that's going to illustrate it really well.
Awesome. I have so many more questions I would love to ask you, but we need to wrap it up. So thank you so much again, Genova and Kate, for this fireside. And yeah, we'll have a break. Thank you very much.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.